In this lecture, we are going to go through some of the very important concepts which are required for sustaining this particular revolution, the Industry 4.0 revolution. So, basically what is required is not just the development in terms of introduction of new technologies, new types of services and so on, but what is also required is to be able to sustain the newer systems, newer methodologies, newer techniques that are introduced. So, what is required essentially is to ensure that the sustainability of the newly introduced concepts, technologies, methods, etc., continue. So, what is sustainability assessment in the context of a manufacturing industry is what we are going to go through in this particular lecture. So, the term sustainability means to continue at a fixed rate. So, a sustainable industry basically provides energy efficiency, conservation of resources and low waste production. So, the last one particularly is very important. So, nowadays energy efficiency is very important also, because there is globally a global concern about saving energy and thereby saving the environment. So, energy efficiency is definitely very important, reducing carbon footprint on the environment, this is definitely very important, but what is also very important is to ensure that the resources that are used in all different other terms are also conserved, the amount of resources that are used are all conserved, and the amount of waste that is produced should be reduced significantly. So, that will be a sustainable method of manufacturing, sustainable method of production or development. So, let us consider the context of sustainable manufacturing industries. So, in the context of Industry 4.0, the proposition is to include the characteristics of previous industry revolution in a much more sustainable way. So, not only that we want to introduce newer things, but also we have to ensure that whatever has been existing from the previous industry revolutions continue and continue at least in the same form that it was before, and also to introduce newer techniques, methods, etc., and continue the same things in a much more consistent, sustainable manner, so that it does not become a one time kind of affair. So, Industry 4.0 or the fourth industry revolution is a comprehensive industrial revolution. It is a comprehensive industrial revolution which takes into account this sustainability issue, because it is not just talking about introducing newer concepts, newer technologies and so on, but also to ensure that there is sustainability in the long run. So, it incorporates Industry 4.0 incorporates globalization and emerging issues as well. So, let us look at each of these issues in a short while, what these issues are. Okay. So, when we talk about sustainability, first what is required is to consider some industry, in our case the manufacturing industry, and assess the sustainability issues. First of all, you have to assess how much sustainable that in particular industry is in terms of its processes that are existing, or the processes or the product that is being manufactured. So, a manufacturing industry is considered as a base of modern industrial society and is the cornerstone of the world economy. So, in order to estimate this sustainability and assess it, it is required to evaluate this term S over SD. Okay. So, sustainability divided by sustainable development, and what is this is all what we are going to go through in the next few minutes. So, how do you arrive at this S by SD term is what we are going to look at. So, this is this formula that we are going to arrive at, and before that we are going to look at the different parameters that would be required to arrive at this particular formula of S over SD. So, this S over SD considers different issues, different parameters. Some of these parameters are linked to the issue of globalization, which is basically considered as one of the important drivers of sustainable industries. Globalization issues affect the sustainability of any development or any manufacturing or any production system. So, these issues are one of the most fundamental requirements. So, as we can see over here in this particular figure in front of you, there are 5 different elements of globalization that are depicted. So, the first one is the business models, the next one is the energy price, information and communication technology adoption, supply chain management, which is a very important thing particularly in the manufacturing context, and the inclusion of emerging markets. So, these are some of the important issues or the cornerstones behind globalization. So, let us take one by one. So, we will start with the supply chain management. So, supply chain management talks about consideration of the different stages through which the production system starting from the production till the supply goes through. So, it is basically a strategic function in any manufacturing industry. So, in these manufacturing industries there are different suppliers, the production system as a whole and different customers, and each of these together go through different stages. So, the sequencing of the stages for the whole system is what SCM basically talks about, supply chain management. So, starting from the production till the supply, considering all the different stages, steps, etc. So, the most important stage in SCM is the selection for outsourcing components or parts of raw material. So, supply chain management has many additional environmental concerns as well. So, these are the issues that basically contribute to the overall sustainability. Issues of climate change, contamination of through the introduction of different wastes to the environment, contamination, resource consumption, how much resources are consumed, resources of all kinds, different human resources, non-human resources. So, all kinds of resources, how much is the resource consumption. So, it is required basically to optimize the resource consumption, right. So, these are the different supply chain management issues. The second thing is the introduction of ICT, information and communication technology, and as we know that ICT overall is the backbone of most of the modern manufacturing industries today. So, if there is no information technology or communication technology, there is no communication within the enterprise and across enterprises, and this communication technology is required even to have distributed communication between different people, distributed communication between the different labs of the same organization, distributed communication across the different locations or different campuses of the same organization, or even it is also required for having proper communication between the different partners of a particular organization who contribute to the manufacturing of the products or the services. So, overall ICT is very important, and we are talking about ICT as a whole in the greater context, in the bigger context, not just the introduction of computers and communication technologies, but also different other things that we talk about in the industry 4.0 context, like sensors, actuators, and the connectivity between them, and the different other things. So, everything taken together. So, it is very required to have communication between the customers, the producers, the suppliers and so on. They need to be able to share the information between themselves, and for doing that, with the help of these computers and computing technology and communication technology, etc., it is required to enable enterprise resource planning, ERP based systems, then wireless communication technology, which is sort of like why wireless is something that makes portability a reality, portability of different equipments, then mobility across different between different parts of the company, between different mobility of different equipments that are being used in the manufacturing process and so on. So, these are very important. So, wireless communication technology is very important. Second thing, a third one is the GPS, which I think all of us know, and the fourth one is the radio frequency identification system. So, with the help of RFIDs we have gone through in the introduction. We have understood what RFID systems are, and so basically you need to tag the different parts in a production system, or different equipments that need to be tracked, or different items or elements or agents that need to be tracked. You would be tagging them with some RFID tags, and that basically helps to have a complete monitoring and efficient monitoring of the mobility and portability of these different parts and constituents of the whole production system. The third one is the energy prices. So, if we are talking about large scale enterprises, there is a consideration of the energy consumption as a whole. So, larger enterprise means larger energy consumption, but that is not something that is sustainable, and that is not something that can that is beneficial for the environment. More energy consumption basically leads to bigger impact on the environment, and which is not very desirable. So, for enterprises it is very important to ensure that there is reduced energy consumption through the introduction of these newer technologies and so on. So, basically the energy has to be first created, the energy is then transformed into a different form, and then gets consumed. For instance, if you are talking about electricity gets generated in the generating power plant, then it is transferred through different grids and transmission lines. It is transferred from one location, from the generating station to elsewhere, to the station, to the electricity substations and different other points. So, it gets transferred, then it is transformed. Before consumption it is transformed. So, one form of energy is transformed to another form of energy. So, in our example basically electricity is transformed. Let us say that if we are talking about lighting lamps and bulbs in the warehouses, then electricity is getting transformed into light energy, right. So, then it is transformed, and that light is something that is getting consumed. So, this is just an example. Like this you can think about other energy consumption processes in the manufacturing process of any product. So, these are the different important issues. So, what is required is, whatever be the cycle, however the energy consumption and this transformation takes place, whatever be it, what is important is to ensure that there is reduced energy consumption overall, and that basically will also have an impact on the economy and the environment, as I said earlier. So, it is required to have energy supply also at reasonable price. So, increasing the price of energy is not good, because if you are increasing the price of energy, then that will affect the overall price of the product or the service that is being created, and that is not going to be sustainable overall from another perspective. So, increase in energy price affects sustainability, and we have seen that different ways it is affecting. It is not, sustainability has different facets. So, what is also not desirable is to increase the cost of the product or the service that is being generated or being developed, and also it is also the cost of energy. If it increases, it is also not very it is not very useful from the environment point of view as well. So, reduction in energy consumption is also required, and energy production can be done not only from the non-renewable sources of energy, but also from the renewable ones like solar, wind and so on. The next one, the next globalization issue is the emerging markets and its consideration. So, markets are able to meet the standards of newly developed innovative products. So, the issue over here is that it is difficult to identify all the world's emerging markets. And so, if you think about the emerging markets, whenever a particular product is being introduced, right. So it goes through typically a phase of dictatorship. dictatorship means like it is a monopoly kind of thing. So, the company which introduced the product basically has monopoly, and then gradually it has to transform towards the free market and free economy, where it will be made accessible to the greater part of the world. And so, the consideration of emerging markets is very important, particularly for developing countries. Business models, we need to think about business models which will be helpful for the greater society, the bigger society. So, it is required to have mass customization. So, mass customization will incorporate the knowledge, including the consideration of international culture across different countries, different societies and so on, and also the local culture where things have been introduced and produced first. So, business models basically have direct linkage with the mass customization. So, what is required is, from the globalization point of view, the product that is manufactured should not only cater to the needs of the local community, but also to the international community. So, business models have to be developed which should take the strategic approach by considering the bigger issues, the strategic issues, that means high level issues for a particular organization business, and the greater issues overall. So, business models will have to be strategically developed, and it is also required to have the business model which will maximize the economic profits for an enterprise by taking into account the competitive benefits and promoting the product value. Emerging issues are also there, like the globalization issues, which also contribute to the sustainability factor. So, emerging issues are there. There are many of these emerging issues which contribute to sustainability. One is technology, growth of population, government regulation, consumption of natural resources, and consideration of crisis, recession and depression. These are the five different contributors to the sustainability factor from an emerging issue viewpoint. So, the first one is the technology. So, technology considerations are very important. So, if we are talking about technology, let us say technology broadly can be classified as hardware and software. So, within hardware we have different types of technologies that are used commonly, technologies such as computer. So, when we are talking about technology, basically we have the hardware technology and the software technologies, right. Within hardware we have different technologies in the manufacturing industries, such as the computer numeric control machines. We have the barcode based technology, barcode. We have different technologies such as RFID, NFC. All of these are quite used quite widely, and these are the technologies that have also contributed to the overall advancement of the manufacturing industries. And like this, actually there are many others also. So, in terms of software, if we look at, we have technologies such as ERP, then the GPS based software technologies, right. So, GPS itself is hardware, but the GPS based software technologies, and like this there are many other software technologies that have emerged and have contributed to the advancement of manufacturing industries. So, these are very important, and so what we need to ensure is that all these different newer technologies should be included in order to have better sustainability. So, advancement in technology basically facilitates manufacturing with higher quality products, lower cost products and products which are manufactured in reduced time. So, these are very important. So, the quality of the product that is developed should be improved with the introduction of these newer technologies. Then the cost of the production should be less, so that the overall product comes to the market at a reduced price and comes faster to the market. The production life cycle should be reduced. So, there is reduced manufacturing time. So, role of technology advancement in the global market is about converting from the traditional system of manufacturing to the automated system, and this is how the technology can help in this particular objective. And also technology can help in having greater agility, faster development and flexible, changeable, maintainable products. In terms of government regulation, it is also required to be able to protect the public and the private sectors. It is required to protect the enterprises. So, for protecting the enterprises, different enterprises have their own different requirements, and those will have to be taken into consideration while arriving at different regulations and rules which can be which can help these organizations, these enterprises to offer better services and low cost goods. So, government regulation will help in basically avoiding unfair competition and also to promote sustainable environment considered development for everyone, including the employees of the organization or the industry. So, government regulations are very important. So, let us look at some of these different aspects of this government regulation. So, we have, if we are talking about government regulations, there are different considerations or the different types of regulations. Some of these regulations are basically having direct impact on the economic issues, some of them have considerations of the social issues and some the environmental issues. So, economic issues basically talks about some of these regulations when a business will enter, when an institution basically enters a business. Price estimations, there are government regulations typically which will help in this price estimation. Then social issues which will essentially help in opening channels between channels of communication, maybe between employees and the enterprise or the management. And environmental issues will concern the protection of the environment. So, for example, let me just take the case of this one because it is easier to understand. So, environmental issues are very important in the manufacturing process. So, government regulations should be there to protect the environment, because if there is some kind of production process which produces lot of waste and in turn harms the environment, the water, the land, etc., are full of different industrial wastes, then that is not good. So, there are government regulations which talk about how to reduce these wastes, and also the wastes that are produced will have to be handled properly. So, these are the roles of the different regulations. So, there are government regulations concerning employment, advertisement, labor, labor laws are there, environmental regulations are there, regulations concerning the safety of the workers, safety of everyone, health regulations are there, and privacy protection of individuals. So, basically the employment and labor rules represent laws concerning wages and salaries, things such as benefits to the workers in terms of retirement plans, compliance with health and safety issues, proper working conditions, issues of expatriate employees such as visas and so on, equal opportunity in employment in terms of promotion and consideration of all workers from different ethnicity in the equal platform, provisioning of authority or higher ranking position. So, these are different types of classes of regulations that are typically there in any industry. In terms of advertisement regulations protect customers, firm honesty about a product, information regulation publicly, then transparency on distribution and manufacturing process. Environmental regulations or rules are maintained by different acts, different agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency, maintaining clean air, reduction of chemical effects in soil, river, water of different water bodies and so on. Then privacy regulations basically concern the information, the safety and security of the information, particularly the sensitive information that is collected about the different employees and the different other stakeholders by a particular enterprise. Safety and health regulations will concern the health issues, providing healthy working environment, and also the overall safety, workplace safety and so on. So, these are the different types of government regulations. So, population growth, monitoring population growth is important for manufacturing industry. It affects the industry growth, food supplies, fertility, sociology, economics, politics, industry locations, use of available lands and so on. There are three different types of countries based on the population growth: developed countries, then emerging countries, emerging economies basically, and developing economies. So, the population growth of countries developing and disadvantaged is typically greater than the population growth of the developed and advantaged countries. So, based on the United Nations report, the population growth is from 1950 to 2050 reduced between 32% to 13% in developed countries and increased between 8 to 20% in emerging and developing countries. So, economic view on the population growth can be of two types: pessimistic view and optimistic view. So, the pessimistic view of population growth basically affects the economic growth, and the optimistic view basically on the contrary talks about increase of the globalization issues such as trade and commerce due to the growth of population. So, pessimistic view basically hinders the overall economic growth on the other hand, and the optimistic view on the other hand basically increases the globalization issues such as trade and commerce. So, population growth is a very important consideration in terms of sustainability. So, basically if the growth is not conformant with the overall growth of the economy, then that will become a disaster for that particular economy. So, then the last one is basically the consideration of economic crisis, recession and depression. So, economic crisis basically takes place over a duration not more than a few months. So, that is the crisis. Recession on the other hand talks about the decline in the economic activity. Recession, that means slowdown of the economy. So, that takes place over a period of time, and that slowdown basically happens quite fast, exponential decline happens. So, basically when the economic activities again increase, then there will be commencement of or the rise of the economy overall. So, basically from the recession, then there will be some kind of acceleration in terms of the growth. Depression is the extremity of recession, which is observed by exponential unemployment increase, reduction in available credit, significant reduction in trade and commerce, and huge number of bankruptcies might also consequently happen, and there is volatility in currency value, and the duration is more than 2 years, and this is basically the extreme case of recession. So, we start with the economic crisis, then that will take place for few months, then recession, basically it is a slowing down, a rapid slowdown of the economy, and thereafter we have the depression. This depression basically is the extreme case of recession where all of these things would happen. So, let us now look at the view of each of these. So, basically if we talk about crisis, so let us say that this is the economic crisis. Then comes the recession phase, and the next one is basically the depression. So, conceptually it would look like this. So, if there is economic crisis or recession, then there would be reduction in prices of different major commodities, and what is important is to increase the productivity and reduce the overall cost. That becomes the solution in such a case. So, it is very important to ensure and avoid this kind of crisis and recession as much as possible. So, in terms of consumption of natural resources, this is one of the very biggest concerns, because that has impact on the sustainable development which is environment friendly. So, this is one of the biggest issues in contrast to economically sustainable development. As natural resources are the main source of revenue in developing countries, it is one of the major sources of social conflicts. So, basically concerns about too much of mining, too much of extraction of oil and gas, demographic shifts, societal behavior, politics, technology, economic situations, difficult economic situations. So, all of these are major contributors in terms of the consideration of natural resources. So, natural resources can be of two types, the renewable ones and the non-renewable ones. Coal, oil, gas, etc. are the non-renewable examples of non-renewable sources of natural energy, and then solar, water, wind, etc. are the examples of renewable sources of energy. So, all of these things we have discussed, because if you recall that we started with that formula S over SD, and S over SD basically has all of these different contributors that we have just gone through so far. So, for computing this S over SD, which is basically the sustainability factor, we have gone through all of these different issues of technology, government regulation, growth of population, crisis, recession, depression, and consumption of natural resources, and their corresponding things. Also we have understood that how these what are these different issues, and what is important for consideration of these different issues. So, while we have understood all of these things, we now need to basically look at this particular S over SD formula. So, S over SD is basically sustainability over sustainable development, and for this S over SD has all of, it is a function of all these parameters, right. So, all these parameters that we have seen in the previous slide, and so this basically can be again rewritten as a function of all these i's, and where I equal to S over E, and S is basically the change towards the sustainability, and Y is basically the exponent of the change towards sustainability, S of E. So, this is basically the overall formula that we wanted to arrive at. To start with, we have looked at this S over SD formula, and these are these different contributors to the different parameters that contribute to this computation of S over SD, and this factor basically talks about whether a particular effort is sustainable or not. So, finally, these are some of these references that you could go through in order to understand these concepts in greater detail. Thank you.